In the deep, dark heart of the Venezuelan rainforest live a people who even today remain almost totally isolated from the outside world. But this is no lost tribe. The Yanomami were first contacted by outsiders over 100 years ago. But very little about their life has changed. The Yanomami today are as remote from the bustle of the modern world as it is possible to be. They remain totally absorbed in the life of the forest, communing with the spirits through the daily use of hallucinogenic drugs. 4 years ago, as part of a small film crew, I spent 3 months with these people. And before I left, I made an impulsive promise to one of the young Indians that one day I would return and satisfy his curiosity by taking him on a journey to the world beyond the forest. It was only later that I began to recognize the real implications of what I was suggesting. The promise I'd made was completely unrealistic, but I was now determined to honor it. There is a widely accepted view that indigenous peoples should be protected from the outside world, their innocence preserved. But my experience of the Yanomami convinced me that they were entirely capable of making their own decisions. My self-appointed minder, Shamupusiwe, known to us as Tapir, was so curious to know where we came from that now, 4 years on, I'm returning to honor my promise and take him on a trip to England. Tapir's village is 600 miles from the nearest small town, and closest I can get by plane is a remote Catholic mission station at Platanal. As the plane touches down, the first person I spot is one of the young Indians whom I knew from my first visit. Then another face from the past appears, the one man whose local influence and organizational skills can turn my proposed jungle trek into a reality.
This is Alfredo. This is the chief of this particular village, and he's an old mate of mine, and thank God he is, because without him we'd be completely sunk.
I've been invited to stay the night at the mission before setting off on the 30-mile walk to Tapir's village, Erimawateri. My host is Padre Bortoli, an Italian missionary who has devoted more than half his life to the welfare of the Yanomami. Bortoli is passionately committed to protecting the Indians and their territory from outside exploitation. I was anxious to know what he felt about my plans.
Bueno, muy bueno.
I'm sure there are people who would say that I should never have embarked on the project, but do you think that it's a dangerous thing to do?
No, they have the right to do that kind of experience. If I want to go outside and see other people, why I cannot? Because they are Yanomami, they can go outside and see other people, why not? It's a human right, no? Everybody has the right to go and to see other things and to change if he wants to change. Why we can't prohibit to do that kind of change? Nobody. No? I think so.
The next morning, we gathered a team of porters and set off. Within minutes, we were into dense rainforest, home to some of the most dangerous snakes on Earth, not to mention venomous spiders and a hideous selection of biting insects.
We're 5 minutes into the journey here. All the bags are falling apart, but they're telling me that I've got to walk on ahead, which is probably very sensible because it's because they know they can make up the time and I can't. Okay, vamos. Okay, and the first log crossing of the journey, and it's a big log, no hay problema. The cameraman and I, neither of us particularly intrepid,
felt rather chuffed that we were keeping ahead of the other porters. But stopping for a moment to catch my breath, I began to sense that something had gone horribly wrong.
I think I'm just beginning to prove rather effectively that I'm not officer material. We set off with 5 porters only an hour ago. We're now down to 1. Now, admittedly, some of them have got very heavy loads and it may be taking them longer than it's taking us. But one of them has already abandoned his bag on the path, so we're lumbered with an extra bag. Our friend here would like to come to England. He'd like my trousers, he'd like my shirt, he'd like virtually everything. He'd particularly like some biscuits, and we haven't got the biscuits with us. The biscuits are in one of the other bags. And although it's at the moment not a major emergency, there is the awful possibility that the 3 porters who are actually supposed to be following us have given up and either abandoned the bags and just run away, or taken our bags away with them. So we just have to wait and see.
And so we waited. And we waited.
You know, I've had deep affection for the Yanomami, but they are a strange people. They live in an incredibly tough environment. I mean, that we are just utterly pathetic in. I mean, the very fact that we just drip sweat all the time. And we're just not built for this environment, so we're immediately a joke. And unfortunately, because I do play the fool, and I'm perfectly happy to admit that I do play the fool, and half of the, you know, not half of them, but there is one part of these people that actually, I think, finds me quite endearing, but there's another half of them that just think, what a bloody arsehole. Whilst we were filming my little reflective bit, just away from the insects, our final loyal porter is also pissed off. So we now have been completely abandoned. I'm sure we can find our way back from here, ish. I'm reasonably certain we can find our way back from here. But we have no insect repellent. Their world is so bloody different to ours, so bloody different. But I just worry that when we go back to the mission, we will be told that we are stupid nabby and we have no idea how to treat the Yanomami, and that we should have been firmer with them and everything else, and maybe we should have done, and that's the problem with my language.
I was now going to have to face the indignity of returning to the mission having failed at the very first hurdle.
I'm not that tough, I'm not a disciplinarian, but I'm bloody going to well start to be one. You bastards! You just wait till I get my hands on you. I should never even have started on this, but I cannot believe that I'll walk into the jungle after 2 hours. Ah! Oh! Okay. Woo! So what's happened? They've eaten all the food. Ah! 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 Okay, bueno. ¿Qué es el problema?
A dictionary would have been helpful at this point, but with a bit of guesswork and as much Spanish and Yanomami as I could muster, I began to realise that we didn't have a mutiny on our hands, but simply one exhausted porter who hadn't bothered to sleep the night before.
Well, it seems like, yeah, Haro is one of our porters. So is Haro okay? Bueno? Haro bueno? Sí, bien. Potillitawa. All right.
Bueno.
Okay, yeah, so he's coming. So everything, oh dear, all this self-doubt. Let's cut this.
And so, having virtually returned to square one, the walk started all over again. I have to admit that every mile seemed painfully familiar.
It's now the end of day 1 of our walk, and we've failed to make our destination, but that's hardly surprising. But equally, we now have a team that I love, adore, trust completely, and they brought us to this disused either hunting camp or it might have been a Wyoming camp, which is when the Yanomami go walkabout. So anyway, this is where we're going to spend the night and get up first thing tomorrow morning and walk to Tapio's village. Bromprolwe is the Yanomami name for a frog with a croak like an outboard motor. It's also a nickname that I acquired on our first trip, and it seems to have caught on in a big way. Okay, I'm going. Vamos? Vamos. I was really eager to set out, but my credibility was immediately undermined when I couldn't even find the path out of the camp. 4 hours into what should have been a 2-hour walk, I began to flag. The worst thing about this walk is that they keep saying, it's an hour away now, it's an hour away now, and I was really believing them to start with, but we've done so many hours away, and now it's come down to 3/4 of an hour, but I'm just not up to it at the moment. Yesterday was fine, but today is just killing me. I'm not a Yanomami, clearly. I've got a backpack on, I'm not even an Englishman. I sensed that we were getting close, but as the village had moved since I was last here, there were no familiar landmarks. We're here.
Maybe we're not, but...
Maybe we're not. Any Mali? Oh, look at this. What a beautiful... Oh, it's nearly a proper Shabona. With loads of... Visitors to Erimawa Terrier are extremely rare and always seen as potentially hostile. Yanomami convention dictates that once strangers have entered the village, they stand stock still in the central plaza and wait to be summoned by one of the elders. But I was so relieved when I spotted Tapia that I completely forgot this vital piece of etiquette. My blunder had made him the centre of attention, and this was clearly something of an embarrassment. This is my mate. Tapia may be 22, but as an only child who was orphaned at a young age, he's always been something of an outsider himself. So it was a relief for both of us that my social gaffe was soon forgiven by the village elders. Tapia soon set to work preparing for the afternoon drug session, which starts with extraordinary regularity with no reference to clocks or watches at 2 o'clock. The finely ground hallucinogenic seeds are mixed into a dough with refined wood ash and spit. This is then dried to produce a highly intoxicating form of snuff. There is a recreational side to these sessions, but they also have important ritual significance. This is the way in which the Indians commune with the spirit world that controls every aspect of their lives. This is quite extraordinary. We've only been here 2 hours. We're already in the middle of a total psychedelic drug world. But what's really struck me since we've been here is that in the 4 years that have elapsed since I last saw Tapia, he's become a man. I mean, he was a boy then. And he's become far less acculturated, whereas he was sort of, seemed to have almost adopted Western ways when I last met him. Now he's a true Yanomami. and he's doing drugs like a demon too. So quite what he's going to make of coming to the outside world, I really don't know. I think he'll probably come with us to Platanal, and there other Yanomami can explain to him what it's like in the outside world, and then if he wants to go on from there, we'll go on, and if he doesn't, that's fine.
As the afternoon wore on, it seemed that I would be invited to participate. Although I had tried this stuff before on my first visit, I'd forgotten how excruciatingly painful that first blast of wood ash could be.
Otro más. Otro más poquito. Otro más poquito. Listo.
No, yes. I can see my boots out there with no legs in them. They're just, because it just looks like me standing there with no body, just feet. All the real Yanomami manage to pour an enormous amount of mucus, and I don't seem to be able to get that flowing at all, which is probably slightly more attractive on camera. Although I don't imagine I look particularly attractive. Now that's an amazing pattern. Now that to me looks like a frog. It looks as if I've just spat out a frog on the floor. That's its head, and those are its legs coming off there, and it's just surfaced from the water. Now that is absolutely acid trip stuff. I am so pleased to be here. I can't believe it. I'm relieved more than anything, and no, it's just brilliant. It's brilliant. So it's a relief to have actually made the end of the journey. All we've got to do is another 5,000 miles back home. It's not a problem. It's really not a problem. Thai says. Inglaterra, Terry. Thai says. Thai says.
Tapir clearly had no idea of what lay ahead, so I did what I could to prepare him.
Here, another floor. Do you understand? No, you don't. You will when you get there. Okay?
The prospect of taking Tapir to England was becoming increasingly surreal, but he was adamant that he still wanted to come. However, I made it very clear that he could opt out at any time, and we would return immediately to Erimawateri.
Okay, I will look after him. We'll be in Inglaterra, Terry.
Tapir insisted he was not afraid, and it became clear he was seeing this as a test of strength, a way to achieve some form of recognition within the village.
What am I doing? What am I doing? I think he really wants to come. I think he does really want to come, but I think he's very nervous, and I think he's sad to leave, and I think all these people around him are also sad to see him leave and worried for him. So
for Tapir, packing was not going to be a major issue. He simply tied a bunch of bananas to one of our rucksacks, and that was all he was going to bring. On our arrival at Platanal, Alfredo arranged for a plane to collect us and decided to come with us on the first leg of the journey. Tapia was about to enter a totally alien world, and I was now responsible for every single aspect of his well-being. I immediately started behaving like an over-anxious parent. Tapia, by contrast, seemed to be taking the whole thing in his stride. Still barefoot, Tapia strode casually into the outside world, carrying some traditional Yanomami bows and arrows. These were actually my souvenirs.
No. What I meant was I don't speak my Spanish is very bad. Some days my Spanish is all right. Okay. All right? Yeah. All right? Hey, what do I do here? Hold on.
There may not be anything remarkable about Puerto Ayacucho, but for Tapia, everything was remarkable. We checked into a small hotel where it fell to me to reveal the wonders of Venezuelan plumbing and how it doesn't always work. Tapia had clearly got it sussed, but just in case he'd missed the subtleties, I resorted to a bit of crude pantomime.
Hay papel aquí. Perfecto. Aquami. Aquí. Ah.
Having demonstrated some of the basic comforts of urban living, it was now time to explain some of the dangers.
¿Es peor? ¿O ushi-ushi? Ushi-ushi? Ishi-ishi.
Tapia was clearly going to need some clothes for this journey, but there was a much more pressing requirement, an identity. Because officially, Tapia didn't actually exist. Yanomami birds are not registered in Venezuela, so Tapia had no papers, and as we were about to discover, no means of getting any. To transform him into a real person, it would be necessary to resort to deception. So, take one non-person, give him a Spanish name and invent a date of birth, then employ the services of a Portuguese hustler. Add 2 accredited Yanomami who are prepared to lie a bit, and a liberal splash of cash just to oil the machine. Carefully mix all these ingredients together and hope for the best. First stop, DX, the registration office. But they want more paperwork. Our Portuguese hustler suggests that for a modest fee, another office could resolve this problem. They couldn't. The recipe clearly wasn't working. Alfredo and I had a council of war, and Tapia was getting bored. Carlos, our Portuguese hustler, kept insisting that everything was going according to plan. After 5 days, I wasn't so sure.
It's not all been simple.
But it's different because in the prefectura is different.
Yes, but you've had to pay money to the Guardian as well. You said, David, give me £5,000.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, because it's necessary.
Yes. Okay. No one ever said this was going to be easy, but it's turning out to be downright impossible. We've trawled around all the offices in town, just trying to find out how you get a bloody, not even a cedula, but just some way out, some way just to get to Caracas to start with. But it's just proving completely impossible. And I think for his sake, as much as anybody's, it's probably better to cut our losses now and say, okay, it's been a brilliant experience, he's had a chance to see the outside world, and I would hate to waste what has been a great trip up to this point. So maybe it is time to quit, but we'll wait. We'll give it one more day and see how it goes.
So Tapia and I returned to the registration office. They now said they could issue an identity card on one condition, that we stay in Puerto Ayacucho for another 3 months. However, there was another option. We should all go to Caracas, where the process could be completed within a couple of hours. I wasn't entirely confident, but nevertheless we all flew to Caracas, where we were promptly arrested because Tapia had no identity card. In desperation, I decided to call on a friend at the British Embassy to see if he could help us through the bureaucratic maze. The one thing we had achieved in Puerto Ayacucho was to accumulate a mass of useless paperwork containing details of Tapia's new identity. He was now Alejandro Chamo Posiwe.
Okay, y el segundo apellido es Aplewe.
Our papers also state that Alfredo is Tapia's uncle, which is not actually true. But Alfredo insists that this is a technicality because all the Yanomami are family.
You will always find something.
Yes.
She's very difficult. It's not as simple as that.
Right.
She said that it's got to be relative by blood.
Right.
That is to say, uncle or aunt.
Right.
Right. But now she's saying that it's got to be an aunt, not an uncle.
But his uncle is not good enough. He needs an aunt. Well, I think I know his aunt is probably still lying in a hammock in Wauwateri. I don't think she was the one that I said, don't worry, I'll look after your boy for you. Oh, I don't believe it.
¿Aló? Sí, ¿cómo está? Dile que me espera un ratito, ¿ok? Right, it was, she said, you go over there.
Right.
And she's aware of everything. I don't know what does it mean, if it means a yes or no.
Right.
Go by Metrobus to Altamira, where the hotel was, and then go to Estación Capitolio.
DX Central is intimidating enough on the outside. But once you cross the threshold, you enter the dingy world of bureaucratic chaos. Our chances of success were looking very slim. Tapir was not having a good time, so I decided that before it was too late, I should take him to the coast to get his first and possibly last taste of the ocean. We returned to the city to see what fate had in store, knowing that this really would have to be our last attempt. I'd been determined to beat the system, but as we entered the halls of bureaucracy once again, things seemed more ominous than ever.
Oh, we've done it! We've bloody done it! I don't believe it! I don't believe it!
What happened, Dave?
We've got it. Suddenly, it all came right, and we've got the comprobante, which is like the cedula. And tomorrow, even though the office is on strike, they've said it's a special case, and they'll give us a passport. And if you believe that, you'll believe anything.
Somehow we had achieved the impossible, and within 24 hours, Tapir, now a fully fledged Venezuelan citizen, was on holiday in England.
Over the hills and far away, Teletubbies come to play.
I was worried that it would all seem a bit tame after Venezuela, but Tapir insisted that England was absolutely beautiful and full of so many incredible creatures. I had to remind myself that for the Yanomami, stalking game in the jungle is a painstaking process, so fields full of tame animals must have been like a dream come true. I knew I would have to satisfy his curiosity, so once he'd slipped into his new trainers, we headed off to the local farm. The young hunter was totally besotted. He was so at ease with these creatures, and quickly got to grips with our alien practices.
She will try and drink it.
As animals were clearly such a genuine source of fascination, our next stop had to be London Zoo. Arming him with a camera so that he could keep his own record, we set off on a big game hunt. Ironically, he ended up by feeding a pair of Venezuelan macaws, which he assured the keepers would make a delicious meal. I felt he was now ready to try a bit of social interaction, so we went to visit the neighbours for supper. There was still no getting away from the animals. For someone used to a simple jungle diet, I was worried that Tapir might have problems with rich food, but he ate everything and usually came back for more. In a slightly desperate attempt to keep the entertainment flowing, I made one or two disastrous errors of judgment.
They use arrows which are about 7 foot long, so is it... Wait.
Bearing in mind that the Yanomami have very little idea of their own history and certainly none whatsoever of ours, Tapir was hardly likely to be impressed by this rather lackluster medieval pageant. But it went deeper than that. He was getting bored of England and was feeling homesick. Even the bows and arrows here were rubbish. Fortunately, his mood quickly changed, and he found there were still plenty of things here to enjoy. Any display of ineptitude on my part was a huge source of amusement. But whilst it was fine to laugh at my failings, he would never attempt anything new unless he felt entirely confident that he could master it. Which, of course, he usually could. Then, for something quintessentially English, fish and chips on Brighton Pier.
Yeah, Coca-Cola. The English seaside.
We'd been invited to go sailing and needed provisions for the voyage, so Tapia had a chance to learn some novel methods of hunting and gathering. His confidence seemed to grow and grow, and he was prepared to try his hand at virtually anything new, sometimes with amazing results. Despite not speaking a word of English, he became completely assimilated into the local scene. He did, however, confide in me that although he really liked English people, he did find them terribly tall. However, an encounter with some smaller specimens at the local primary school proved to be his undoing. The energetic young hunter was cut down in his prime. A torn ligament is bad enough in our world, but in the jungle it could render him completely helpless. I was seriously worried that he may have done some permanent damage, but the local physiotherapist felt confident that with rest and some simple exercises, he would recover.
Okay, uno más. Uno.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Totihitawa.
Tapia's bizarre holiday was drawing to a close, but I needed to be certain that his leg was really better before we returned to Venezuela. So I called a Yanomami-speaking friend in Caracas and asked her to quiz him about his injury. Tapia instantly mastered the art of telephone conversation and assured Marie-Claude that he felt completely recovered. So we lost no time in getting back to some outdoor pursuits and went to visit an old friend of mine on his farm.
I thought you'd like to get them with a bow and arrow. Useless bow maker.
Absolutely.
Ticehurst. Disgrace to the Yanomami tribe.
Absolutely.
Suddenly we found a use for my Yanomami souvenirs, and Tapia was able to demonstrate his traditional hunting skills. For anyone, meeting a celebrity for the first time can be a bit unnerving. But for Tapia, Roger Daltrey was just a bloke who liked fishing.
You're very difficult when you don't speak fluent Yanomami.
Yeah, just quite. I find that too.
And Shepherd's Bush is not quite the same, is it?
By chance, the Who were making a rare appearance at Wembley Arena on our last night in England, and we were both invited.
Can you see the real me? He needs more of that. Tell me what it's going.
Tapia would soon find himself sitting as a VIP guest in the middle of the largest crowd he could possibly imagine.
Can you see
couple of years' time, he's going to come back and then we'll fly him.
Come back and we catch fish. We get time.
Really?
We got shrimp. Sure. Okay. Adios. It's been...
Now a seasoned traveller, Tapia was about to return to his motherland for the first time as a bona fide Venezuelan citizen. And once we arrived in Caracas, it became clear that Tapia had already organised our itinerary. Marie-Claude, he informed me, was expecting us at her apartment at 4 o'clock sharp.
Televisión, música.
Música, a ver. Música napa, música wapuri, washito brau.
Animal hamkuami. Yatania hili mrato. Yanon pereh gotehe. Yatania hili mrato. Preo napa pereh yatan hili ma. Preo yatpa hili ma.
After a spot of last-minute shopping and a visit to the hairdressers, Tapia was all set to return to the jungle.
The one thing I was really dreading about this whole trip was the walk back to Yanomami, and now it looks as if we can't do the walk because it's been so wet that the path is almost impassable. So we're going to attempt to go back by river, which has lots of its own problems, so this is no certainty at all that we're going to get there, and we may end up just wading through acres and acres of swamp. God knows what's going to happen, but anyway, we've loaded all our gear into a bongo and we're about to go.
The first stage of the journey down the wide reaches of the Orinoco was relatively straightforward. But once we turned off towards Yanomami, things got much slower. Because this stretch of river is littered with unexpected obstacles. It was getting late and it seemed unlikely that we would reach Yanomami before dusk, but Tapia assured me that we were getting very close.
I don't know whether he's just cold or whether he's just shaking with excitement, but he's quivering like a jelly baby.
And there in the gloom, obviously alerted by the sound of the outboard motor, the whole village was waiting on the riverbank to greet us. After 2 months away, Tapia the intrepid traveller had returned. I was slightly concerned that I was stealing his thunder, but I needn't have worried. He would be holding court long into the night. Early the next morning, he came up with a strangely urgent request. He needed 4 kilos of rice from our supplies immediately. It transpired he was going to make a grand gesture to celebrate his return and serve breakfast to the whole village. For the Yanomami, a man's status is measured not by his wealth, but by his generosity, and Tapir visibly blushed with pride as he assumed the role of provider. He was clearly thrilled to be back home, but he was equally thrilled to be able to explain the mysteries of the outside world. Tapir didn't seem remotely possessive about his newfound material wealth, and it wasn't long before he'd given virtually everything away. As he recounted his tales, I got an unexpected insight into the things that had really impressed him. It's impossible to say what the long-term effects of this trip will be for Tapir, but he's certainly returned home with a newfound confidence. And there is one thing he hasn't given away: his passport.
Julia jo rupo, jari jo napan jo krene, jari jo krene lente kaki, jari jo rupo, jari sei, napan krene yamu. Ini kama se kena nasi, ini kekiki.